right, good morning. Welcome. I want to thank the Hartman family, our good friend Alan Hartman, Patricia Hartman. Thank you for having all of us out here this morning. We just had a very robust conversation in the room about what makes America and Texas, and Abilene, Texas in particular, the most spectacular place on planet Earth for business. I want to thank Senator Cruz. It's good to see you again, sir. Thank you for being here. And we want to take just a few minutes to talk about the conditions of not only manufacturing, but business in general here in our country, and how we can all begin to really work together to make good things happen. And if I heard the senator say one thing over and over and over this morning, it's that it all starts with jobs. So thank you all for being here. And Senator, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. Let me say thank you to Patricia, Alan. Thank you to the entire Hartman family for hosting me here. Thank you for your leadership in the community, and thank you for everyone who came out and participated in the roundtable. We had, I think, a really good, fulsome discussion about the challenges facing manufacturing right now, and the steps that government can take to improve that. My number one priority in the Senate for 12 years has been very simple. It has been jobs, jobs, jobs. And the reason for that is straightforward. That is the top priority of Texans all across our state. Every part of the state, from East Texas to West Texas, from the Panhandle all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley, Texans want jobs. We want more jobs. We want higher wages. We want better opportunity for our kids and our grandkids. And what I understand is that jobs do not come magically from Washington, D.C., from some bureaucrat in a windowless office. Jobs come from the men and women gathered right here. Jobs come from entrepreneurs that are putting capital to risk to meet a need. But I also know government can screw it up really badly. And if you want to create an environment where jobs are plentiful, the two best levers that we have are tax reform and regulatory reform. Every time we cut taxes, we simplify the tax burden. Every time we repeal job-killing regulations, the result is we get more jobs. And it's not hard to figure out, 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. If you create an environment where small businesses are prospering, they're growing, they're expanding, you get lots and lots of jobs. If you create an environment where you are beating the living daylights out of small businesses, jobs disappear. You know, we've had, for more than a decade, over 1,000 people a day move into the state of Texas. When I was first elected 12 years ago, there were 26 million Texans. Today, there are more than 30 million Texans. We've added 4 million Texans in just over a decade. I'm reminded of the Babylon Bee has a satirical headline. It says, Texas is building a wall on its southern border, consisting of nothing but discarded one-way U-Haul trucks from California. And there is enormous truth to that. You know, if you look right now, the cost of a U-Haul truck from California to Texas is more than 300% the cost of a U-Haul truck going the other way. Because that's market pricing, or as Kamala might say, she just fixed the prices for everything. And then you'd have no trucks anywhere. And you look at where people are leaving. What are the states they're fleeing from? California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Connecticut. Big blue states that have high taxes, that have high regulations, that hammer small businesses, that hammer jobs, and they come to Texas for a whole lot of reasons, but number one, Texas is where the jobs are. And so in my view, we got to be very, very careful here in Texas not to screw that up. We need to keep Texas, Texas. That's what I've been trying to do every day for 12 years. I've had the privilege of waking up and fighting for 30 million Texans and fighting for jobs, fighting for freedom, fighting for security, fighting for the basic common sense principles that make Texas who we are. And I got to say, in particular, West Texas, I love West Texas. I think if the entire state could embrace West Texas values, if the entire country could embrace West Texas values, we would turn this country around like that. West Texas, y'all believe in independence, self-reliance. You believe in helping out your neighbor. You believe in doing the right thing. You believe in hard work. West Texas is Texas. And I will say, I spend a lot of time out in West Texas. We've got, whether it is oil and gas that is driving an enormous amount of our economy in Texas and across the country, or whether it is manufacturing, or whether it is ag, be it cotton or cattle, or any of 1,000 other things. West Texas plays a critical role in our state, and I'm proud to stand with the farmers and ranchers. I'm proud to stand with the small business owners. I'm proud to stand with the manufacturers. And I'm proud to stand with the moms and dads who are trying to raise your kids in an environment where they learn good values, where they're safe, where they're taught to love America, where they're not confused by the question, what is a woman? By the way, that didn't used to be a trick question. For like all of recorded history, people knew the answer until like the last 7 minutes. And for what it's worth, I can prove to you right now that Joe Biden knows what a woman is. He only sniffs the hair of girls. In 12 years in the Senate, never once have I seen Joe Biden walk up to Chuck Schumer and start sniffing his hair. He knows. And you know what? I am even more certain. Bill Clinton knows what a woman is. He is not confused on that front. Look, there's a value when one of our two parties gets so nutty. It's bad for our country, but it has a value of opening up people's eyes. People who say, that doesn't make any sense. It's my job every day to fight for you, and I'm proud to do it. All right, with that, let's open it up to questions.
Senator.
Yes, sir.
I manufacture ammunition.
Yep.
And the federal ammunition excise tax of 11% on every dollar that I sell is outrageous. I live on a margin that's it's ridiculous. And can we do something about the federal ammunition excise tax?
Look, I think it's a great question, and it combines two things I care deeply about. Number one, taxes. And you're hard-pressed to find a tax that I don't want to cut. And number two, ammo, without which my guns don't work. And listen, you're in the business of manufacturing something. How many people in the manufacturing world actually make something protected by the Bill of Rights? Because there's a reason the Second Amendment to the Constitution is there. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Except for 11%.
You make a powerful case, and I'm with you, and I'll tell you, I've been proud to fight for the Second Amendment each and every day. And listen, I'll say elections are about choices. You know, my opponent, the Democrat congressman who's running against me in this election, he said, and I quote, "I wish the Second Amendment had never been written." Well, that's a view. Not a very Texan view, but it's a view. Elections are about choices. So I look at the Second Amendment as a vital protection of the safety of our families and our communities. A vital protection the fundamental right each of us has if someone comes into your home seeking to do harm to you or your family or your babies, you've got a God-given right to defend your family. And that's something in West Texas people understand. I got to say, if you remember back during the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots, where you saw cities burning, people being looted, and I remember down in Houston, I live in Houston, there were some protests downtown, and they were saying they're going to go into the residential neighborhoods and start attacking the houses. And I got to say, I just looked around and said, you know, that's going to be a real bad idea. I know my neighbors, and this is not going to end up the way they did. And you know what? They looked around and said, yeah, never mind. We'll just go back to waving placards. And that's all right. They got a right to wave placards. They don't have a right to assault someone. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Elections do matter. And if we get the results we want, we know there's going to be positive change for the integrity of our elections.
Yes.
But we have an election coming up. What, if anything, are we doing about this election to try to reduce at least any fraud that would exist?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. Voter fraud is a real problem. It has been a persistent problem. As long as there have been elections, there's been election fraud. I mean, you go back to the cavemen thousands of years ago, electing a grand poobah. Somebody stuffed the ballot box. That is human nature. We need to be vigorous fighting against it. The good news in Texas is actually in redder states, we passed election integrity laws that make it harder to cheat. So we have common sense steps. So for example, we require photo ID to vote in Texas. A lot of blue states, they don't require photo ID. By the way, ironically enough, any reporters going to the Democratic Convention in Chicago? If you happen to be, you know what you need to get in? A photo ID. They built a wall, and they require a photo ID to get into the DNC convention. But remember, they'll also tell you requiring a photo ID is racist. They say them both at the same time. We also in Texas have banned ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting may be the single most pernicious practice because it lets paid operatives handle the ballots of somebody else. And it invites voter fraud. In Texas, that is illegal. So in Texas, we've made real steps to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. That being said, we need to be vigorous and we need to monitor that. That means we need poll workers on the ground. That means we need lawyers prepared to challenge if there are things that are going that are illegal or unconstitutional. We need to be prepared to challenge them. But I'll tell you, the really good news is that historically voter fraud only matters on the margins. It only matters when it's close. And so the best answer for this election is win by a big enough margin they can't steal it. And that's certainly what we're working to do.
And I do want to open this up to the press. We have time for 2 questions from the press.
Yeah.
Senator Cruz, one of the main topics in Texas right now is school choice.
Yes.
Do you see it having a positive effect in rural areas like Abilene when we're already seeing a decrease in the public school district?
So it's a fabulous question. Listen, school choice, I believe, is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. And I've been deeply involved in the school choice movement for 30 years. School choice is about giving the poor and the middle class the same rights the rich have always had. I think every child in Texas ought to be able to choose an excellent education, and that is regardless of your wealth, of your race, of your ethnicity, of your zip code. I think education is the gateway to the American dream. I think about my father. When my father came to Texas, he fled Cuba. My dad had been imprisoned in Cuba. He'd been tortured in Cuba. When he came to Texas, he was 18 and he couldn't speak English. His first job was washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. But he'd been admitted to the University of Texas. And so my dad started as a freshman at UT in 1957 and worked to get a math degree. He ended up going and getting a business, starting his own business, becoming a small business owner. Today my dad's a pastor. He's 85. He's on the road 6-7 days a week, preaching all over Texas, preaching all over the country. Education is the gateway to achieving the American dream. And I will say, when I first got involved in fighting for school choice, it was 30 years ago. At the time, the idea was mostly just an idea. It had not been implemented many places. So there were lots of potential harms people talked about. We now have over 30 jurisdictions across the country that have implemented school choice. And we know that virtually all of the harms that people suggested don't come to pass. We know what happens. When parents get the ability to choose the best education for their kids, what happens is, number one, some parents will choose a different school. Some parents will choose a private school, a parochial school, a religious school. Those parents will make choices based on their own values and what they think is best for their kids. We know the kids that use those scholarships get better education outcomes. They get better math scores. They get better reading scores. They get better college admission rates. Their lives and careers and job trajectory is markedly better. But this is the really important point. We now know that those students who don't use the scholarships, those students who stay in the public schools, get much, much better education. What we know now is something we should have known to begin with, but we now have proof, which is competition works. That when you have choice come into a community, competition improves the public schools. I want the public schools stronger. Listen, there are thousands upon thousands of patriots, teachers who devote their lives to their kids, to teaching kids, to inspiring them, to helping them live better lives. These teachers want their kids to have better lives. And we now know that school choice improves the public school system and gives better options. In a rural setting, there are different options than there are in an urban setting. But choice responds to the needs of the parents and the kids, and I will say this, I am more optimistic than I've ever been that this January, when the Texas legislature comes back in session, that we are going to pass an historic school choice legislation. I got to tell you, I'm embarrassed as a Texan that Texas has not led on school choice. It's been a lot of other states like Florida and Arizona, that have been way in front of us leading on school choice. As a Texan, I think we should lead on everything. But this coming legislative session, I'm incredibly optimistic. Look, I get involved in a lot of state races. That is an unusual thing for U.S. senators. So there are 100 U.S. senators. To the best of my knowledge, 99 of them stay out of primaries in their own state. And there's a reason for that. Because getting involved in primaries in your own state is stupid. It hurts you. Why? Because when you do it, the rule of thumb is typically you get about half their friends and you get all their enemies. And so it ends up hurting you, which is why every other senator says, I'm staying out. I don't do that. I get involved in a lot of races. I get involved in a lot of state Senate races and a lot of state House races. And here's what I do, and I've done this for 6 years. I sit down with my team, I have them develop a spreadsheet, and I say, show me every vote that this state rep or this state senator has cast on school choice. And if he or she has voted in favor of choice, and they're otherwise relatively conservative, they're very likely to get my support. And if they voted against choice, the chances of my supporting them are essentially zero. And the chances are quite likely that if there's a credible primary opponent, I'm going to support that primary opponent. And I tend to do so in a way that is not gentle. When I support someone, I come in and I cut radio ads and TV ads, and I say, look, we're going to get school choice one way or another, and if you're going to stand in the way of it, then I'm going to try to find someone who will help us get school choice for the kids of this state. We just had a whole series of elections this cycle, and most of the elected officials who had opposed choice lost in those primaries or runoffs. I think that changed the legislature. I think we're going to see an historic result next year. And so that's a big deal. I think it will be transformational for the kids of Texas, that a low-income kid who may be African American or Hispanic, may have a single mom, may not have a lot of advantages, but that kid ought to have a right to be able to have an excellent education. And there's nothing we can do that can change and benefit Texas more than making sure our next generation of kids get a good education.
And we have time for just one more question.
What do you hope to accomplish over your next term that you haven't been able to do? And why do you think it has been accomplished over the past 12 years?
Well, sure. Look, my top 3 priorities are jobs, freedom, and security. Now, what has that meant? That has meant really 2 things. Number 1, I've spent 12 years fighting against bad policies that hurt the people of Texas. And that's been true whether those bad policies came from Barack Obama, or whether they came from Chuck Schumer, or whether they came from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So when we've had an open border, as we have the last 4 years under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, I have been proud to be the leading defender fighting to secure our border. And by the way, when Donald Trump was president, I worked hand in hand with Trump to secure the border, and we had incredible success. We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. We had success. When Trump is reelected in November, I will once again work hand in hand with him. We will secure the border again. On top of that, you look at the policies of the last 4 years of waging war against Texas oil and gas, Texas energy producers. This makes no sense. It hurts consumers. It hurts jobs. I have been proud to be the leading defender of oil and gas in the United States Senate. And again, I'm confident when Trump is reelected, I will once again work hand in hand with him, and we will end the assault on oil and gas, which is going to drive down inflation, and it's going to benefit consumers in West Texas and all across the state. Beyond that, in addition to fighting against bad policies, another very important part of my job is fighting to win real bipartisan pro-jobs, pro-growth legislative victories. In my 12 years in the Senate, I have authored and passed 100 different pieces of legislation into law. Legislation that is making a real difference in the lives of people here in West Texas. I'll give you a couple of examples. A number of them concern transportation. I am the ranking member on the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over roughly 40% of the U.S. economy. If your top priority is jobs, and that's my top priority, there is no better place to do that from than the Senate Commerce Committee. By the way, if we win the majority in November, I'll be the chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, which is a big, big deal for the state of Texas. Three quick examples. Number 1, I-14. I-14 is a brand new interstate. It's going to go from the Permian Basin east all the way to Georgia, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. That legislation, I was the lead author behind I-14. I teamed up with Raphael Warnock, a very liberal Democrat from Georgia. The legislation was Cruz Warnock. We went to the Senate floor. I spoke in favor of it. Raphael spoke in favor of it. And after that, Tom Carper, who's a Democrat from Delaware, he stood up on the Senate floor. He said, well, heck, if Cruz is for it and Warnock's for it, we all got to be for it. And it passed 100-0. That freeway, when it's built, it's going to bring thousands and thousands of jobs in construction, and it's going to bring thousands of jobs, making it easier to move goods and services, making it easier to move livestock and crops, making it easier to move oil and gas and equipment, making it easier to move military equipment east and west. There's a second bill I did, and that's I-27, the Ports to Plains corridor. Now, I-27 is going to run from Laredo all the way north through West Texas, through the Panhandle, through New Mexico, ultimately all the way up to Canada. It's the north-south version of what I-14 is, the east-west version. I-27, again, I was the lead author of. I teamed up with Ben Ray Lujan, a Democrat from New Mexico. The legislation was Cruz Lujan. That likewise passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, has been signed into law. When I-27 is completed, that too is going to create thousands of construction jobs and then enable West Texas to move goods and services in a way that is qualitatively different from what we can do now. Third and final example I'm going to give you is legislation that I authored that was just signed into law in December. And it deals with bridges. There are 4 bridge projects right now in South Texas, bridges to Mexico. 2 bridges in Laredo, 1 in Brownsville, 1 in Eagle Pass. All 4 of those projects were being delayed, and badly delayed, by bureaucratic roadblocks put in place by the Biden-Harris White House. A couple of years ago, city leaders from Laredo came to D.C. to meet with me, and they asked for my help. They were frustrated out of their mind. By the way, the elected leaders there were almost all Democrats, but they didn't care that it was a Democrat White House. They were frustrated. Why is this White House blocking these bridges? We need these bridges. They asked me, they said, Ted, would you lead the fight to get it done? I said, absolutely. I worked to bring together a bipartisan coalition. We unified the South Texas congressional delegation, got every Republican, every Democrat, all on the same page. I drafted legislation to expedite the permitting of those bridges, introduced it in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, on which I served, got Democrat support and Republican support, passed it out of committee, passed it on the floor of the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support, passed it in the House with overwhelming bipartisan support, and the President signed it actually on December 22nd of last year, which happens to be my birthday. I thought it was a fabulous birthday present. And just a few months ago, those permits finally issued. Now let me give you a sense of how consequential that is. By expediting those permits, we've chopped 3, 4, 5 years off the time to build those bridges. Let's just take one of those bridges. The World Trade Bridge in Laredo. World Trade Bridge is right now the largest land port in America. Texas does every year about $800 billion of trade with Mexico. Mexico is by far our biggest trading partner. The World Trade Bridge is 8 lanes today. On any given day, you'll look into Mexico and you'll see a line of 18-wheelers that extends 4, 5, 6 miles. And they'll sit there all day. They'll sit there spewing smoke into the environment. It's terrible for the environment. And you're just wasting money. Produce is wilting in the back of the trucks as they're sitting there waiting in the sun. Laredo has proposed taking that bridge and expanding it from 8 lanes to 18 lanes. It is a massive expansion. When that is completed, it will produce tens of thousands of good jobs in Texas, billions of dollars of additional economic investment, and it's going to benefit every Texas farmer, every Texas rancher, every Texas manufacturer, every Texas small business, every Texas consumer. And so those are the victories that I've been working on, and we still have an enormous amount to do coming back next year, hopefully with a Republican president, a Republican Senate, Republican House. We need to secure the border. We need to cut taxes. We need to simplify the tax code. We need to repeal job-killing regulations. We need to fight to keep our families safe, and that's something I'm proud to do every day.
Senator, if we could work
So, Patricia, we have here a certificate of commendation presented to Patricia Hartman on being named the Abilene Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Small Business Administration, Northwest Texas Business Resource Center 2023 Regional Exporter of the Year for the South Central Region area. And you guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
You're one of our industrial parks.
Oh, good. Fantastic.
We are working with that.
Yeah, we're gonna go.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah. And we work with Bobby a lot.
I know. Keep me on my toes. We can sneak out.
All right, you want a picture?
Okay.
If you can look right here first. There we go.
Congratulations, Pat.
Right here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and over here.
Sir, I was wondering if you'd sign my constitution. Thank you so much. I've got 1,000 questions, but I know you're too busy.
Well, I appreciate you coming out.
I've taken a lot of pictures with you. Can I take one?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, really got it.